What is up, everybody? This is Clint Lamb with the Cover Crimson YouTube channel. Here to talk a little bit about Alabama's receivers because right now, it's the off season. Everybody's talking. I totally get it. We're all ranking, we're all trying to project, and there's a lot to discuss. Obviously, there's a lot of changes, especially with the transfer portal. But I wanted to talk about Alabama's wide receiver room because I don't feel like that the depth in that wide receiver room is getting enough respect right now. It's not the top of the depth chart necessarily. Most people will look and they'll say Ryan Williams, easily one of the best players in college football, returning players in college football, going to be an alpha number one. And he's a guy that most offenses don't have. So they acknowledge his talent, his rare generational ability. They look at a guy like Germie Bernard and they'll tell you he's tough, he's reliable, does a lot of things extremely well, will do the gritty work, he will block, do all of it. So there's a lot of respect for Germie Bernard and the time that he spent in this Kalen DeBoer, Ryan Grubb offense or system. And then a guy like Isaiah Horton, who is a big body complementary piece to those two, has a ton of upside. I think bare minimum, you're looking at a 2B option along with Germie Bernard with the potential to be viewed as kind of a guy who would be a number one for pretty much any offense that didn't include or almost any offense that didn't include Ryan Williams or Jeremiah Smith. Like that is his upside. To be a top 10 receiver in college football himself is essentially what I'm trying to say. But at the bare minimum, in my opinion, you're getting a very good quality wide receiver 2-3-ish. So people will look at that and they'll say, okay, one of the best players in college football, two really good number two receivers. Alabama's got one of the best receiving trios in all of college football. And then they'll make mention of maybe a piece here or a piece there as far as the depth. But what I don't think people are looking at enough, and it does take some level of projecting. Like we have not seen it necessarily. We haven't seen it from Jalen Hale. We haven't seen it from Rico Scott. We haven't seen it from Lotzeir Brooks on the college level. A lot of these players, it does take some projecting, but you can, based off of people you talk to and based off of the feedback from those conversations, you can get a pretty good idea of who has a chance of breaking out amongst the depth options in this Alabama wide receiver room. And that's the part that I think that next wave of players are the guys that we're not really talking about enough. Like I'll go ahead and tell you, Rico Scott is a dude. And it's not just from what people said publicly when it comes to, the Alabama program and people who are in that building. It's also based off of conversations that I've had privately with certain people who have said, hey, you need to be keeping an eye on this guy. This guy can ball. Doesn't necessarily mean he's guaranteed to be Alabama's wide receiver 4, even though I do think the fact that he can move around, you can play him at the Z, you can play him at the H, maybe even play him a little bit at the X. I think that with his versatility, it is very possible that he emerges as Alabama's 4th wide receiver. But it's also possible that he's the 5th or 6th. But that's the guy that I probably like the most right now, other than a Lotzeir Brooks, who's a true freshman, who we'll talk about in just a second. A guy like Jalen Hale, he was going to be a massive part of Alabama's wide receiver room in 2024. In fact, I think that if he would have been healthy, you would have had a very strong trio, effective trio, because Jalen Hale probably would have been your X. Ryan Williams probably would have been your Z, who could also play in the slot. And then Germie Bernard probably would have been your slot, who could also play the Z. So moving guys around, and Jalen Hale would have got moved around too. Wouldn't have just been those two players, but he would have been a massive part. He kind of fits what Kalen DeBoer wants to do, the ability and the skill set that he looks for at the wide receiver position. Jalen Hale fit that more than Kendrick Law, more than Kobe Prentice, or a lot of the other guys who were on Alabama's wide receiver depth chart last season. It was just an unfortunate injury. But if he can return to form, there's no guarantee of that. It was a nasty knee injury. We've heard positive reviews about how he's progressing, but we don't know that for sure. But if he returns to form, you've now got, in my opinion, another starting caliber wide receiver coming off the bench. And so that is another potential option, someone who has a little bit of length, some ball winning ability downfield, can stretch defenses, can do a little bit more than that, but that would probably be his primary responsibility. I really like his skill set and what he could potentially provide. Then you start working your way down to a guy like Lotzeir Brooks. Yes, he is a true freshman, and he wasn't an overly, it wasn't like he was a 5-star player according to the recruiting rankings, So a lot of people was like, okay, you're going to take a 4-star guy who is ranked down there in the 200s, some places the 300s, and you're going to say he's going to take college football by storm as a true freshman. Well, first of all, I'm not saying he's going to be a starter necessarily, but he has game breaking ability. He can win at all 3 levels. He has the speed, the burst. He has game breaking ability that I think could end up being really beneficial for Alabama's offense. Now, because he is a true freshman, we do not know for sure if he's going to be that guy in year 1. He could end up having a very minor role, does not contribute a whole lot, has to develop behind the scenes a little bit, or it's possible that he's a rotational piece who actually ends up being one of the more dynamic weapons in this Kalen DeBoer Ryan Grubb offense as a true freshman. You once again projecting, but he needs to be viewed through the lens of being like a 5-star incoming freshman more than a lowly rated 4-star, which is what he ended up being. He's got a lot more ability, and anybody that has kept up with his high school tape as far as keeping up with what he did during the spring, he's got a lot more upside than that recruiting ranking would indicate. And then you got a guy like Cole Adams, who I think would be a wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4 at a lot of different programs. But yet we're talking about him potentially being Alabama's wide receiver 7. And that only speaks to the depth of that room. Reliable underneath option, has a little bit more vertical ability than I think a lot of people give him credit for. Don't know how much he'll be used in that area, but he has more speed than you would think. And, he was going to be a guy who was probably going to be wide receiver 4 or 5. There was even talk about him potentially being a starter last year. And now we're talking about him being wide receiver 7. Once again, that's the health of that room. He ended up dealing with injuries. Is he anything special? Does he have the natural God-given abilities of some of these other guys we've been talking about? No, but he does have a lot of talent, and he is a very reliable option who, if Alabama had to rely on him, I think he could come through. And then you've got guys like Jalen Mbakwe, who is just a complete unknown. Don't know what he's going to be at the wide receiver position, but he's one of the best athletes in college football, making the move from cornerback where he actually had a lot of success on the defensive side. We don't know what to expect from him, but even if Alabama gets absolutely 0, still think they're in really good shape at receiver. A guy like Derek Meadows, a lot of length. 6'5", 208 pounds, has that ball-winning ability to go up and win the 50-50 balls downfield, can be a mismatch problem for you, was a lot further along in his development than I thought he would be when I was able to watch him on A-Day. But that's a guy that I'm putting down there at wide receiver 9 right now. So out of 10 receivers on the roster, and the other being Bubba Hampton, who is another former 4-star prospect, has some dog in him, as Nick Saban liked to say. And so that's Alabama's wide receiver room. I think bare minimum, you run 6, 7, maybe even 8 deep, but I think 6 is like, okay, let's say you miss on some of these guys. We're talking very positively about everybody. But let's say you're wrong. Maybe Jalen Hale, his health does end up holding him back. Or maybe Lotzeir Brooks is a true freshman. He's not ready to be that guy. Or maybe Isaiah Horton, we're expecting him to be a starter and a big-time player in this Alabama offense. Maybe it doesn't translate from Miami to Alabama. Maybe just there's something there where he ends up being a decent player, but nothing to write home about. All these things are possible. But I think even if you're wrong about 1 or 2 of these guys, you still have a lot of depth. And I just think a lot of the respect is happening at the top. A lot of people are acknowledging those top 3 guys. I would like to see them do the same as far as that next wave, because that next wave, in my opinion, is what really separates them from a lot of other schools. So I just wanted to hop on here real quick, talk about the Alabama wide receiver room. What are your thoughts? What do you think about this room? What do you think about this group? And do you think that they're getting enough respect when it comes to the national media? I would love to hear your feedback. Get in the comments, like this video, and definitely subscribe to the Cover Crimson YouTube channel.
Escape to Pearl River Resort.